Which word of the day? Today's word is Samhain, noun. Samhain is a pagan religious festival originating from an ancient Celtic spiritual tradition. In modern times, Samhain is usually celebrated from October 31st to November 1st to welcome in the harvest and usher in the dark half of the year. Celebrants believe that the barriers between the physical world and the spirit world break down during Samhain, allowing more interaction between humans and denizens of the other world.
You haven't even read that?
Wait, what are you doing with the book?
So he has the confidence to finish the story.
Hear now the words of the witches.
This is Kevin, and welcome to Words of the Witches, the Charmed podcast that will guide you through the lesser-known published material in the Charmed universe and decide how it fits into the grand narrative of the TV series. Episode 20, Between Worlds. And I have with me today Lewis Oakley. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to finally be here.
Yes. We talked a little bit before we started recording how it's been a long time coming. I've been following you. We've been talking for quite a while, and
Well, I know. I mean, it was insane. So I obviously do a lot of work on the whole being bisexual and being a bisexual man and writing articles and doing all that stuff. And then I don't really remember how I just found you. But basically, I came across your Instagram and I was like, oh my God, there is another bisexual in the world that loves taking pictures in his underwear, that loves Charmed, that loves superheroes and stuff. I was like, oh my God, maybe finally I found my tribe. Maybe this is it.
Yes,
This
kin.
all makes sense.
Yeah, because I don't remember what came first, the bisexual connection or the Charmed connection, but it's very exciting.
Yeah, I have no idea. I just remember being absolutely mesmerized, being like, it all makes sense. This must just be how gay people always seems like they get each other. It's like, oh, we've got a culture, we bond over things. And it's like, well, I hardly know any other bisexuals. Being able to bond over anything, other than, yeah, we both happen to be bisexual. But no, with you, it was like, oh my God, yes.
And that's why I chose you for this book, Between Worlds, because, as bisexual guys, we kind of live between worlds.
You do.
So you are quite the activist, with your articles and your little TV appearances and your little YouTube videos I've been watching.
Thank you.
It's very exciting because I always thought I was pretty much activist, but that's just because I'm very vocal about it. I'm very making myself people aware, but I don't do anything to your extent. So it's very nice to see and nice to hear and nice that you're a voice for the community.
Well, thank you so much. I love what you do.
Well, thank you.
I'm also loving all the props in the background. I'm having a real geek out of what is there. The dream.
Yeah.
Look at all your stuff.
There's so much more. There's so much that you can't see, but this is just the biggest stuff that's out.
I'm like, there is such a market for all this stuff. Why do people not sell it? Obviously, they had Prescott Manor, which what happened there? But it's such a shame that they didn't sell more stuff. I would give you money. I think that there must be such a replica business that's just not been capitalized on. But then I think that probably has to do with the network not believing in it and being like, oh no.
And licensing and rights, and so it's sad, it's strange, and people are still going to be making stuff. It's just a shame that Prescott Manor had to close, because I know Wayne had a hard time. He really, when he got that cease and desist notice, it really took a toll on him, and he kind of fell out of Charmed. He said thinking about Charmed made him depressed.
That's so sad. He was
so sad.
Talented.
Yeah.
I wanted everything, but it was literally at the time I was quite poor, so I can't afford it, but I want it. And I just imagine what he would have been doing now, because I remember he was working on a replica of the house, and that looked so good. And I was like, oh my God. He was just really talented, and it really annoyed me because I think it was around the time they were bringing out the new Charmed, wasn't it? It was kind of are you just legally clearing decks here to kind of be like, oh no, we want to hide the original so that we can make space for the new one. It's but stop it. You can't do this.
Such a shame. But I wanted to ask, because you do a podcast called Bisexual Brunch.
Yeah.
Which is very exciting. I'm going to be appearing on that sometime soon. We recorded that a while ago. And
well, I know. So I think you're on the next episode, but I was really not annoyed about it, but I was the one that was like, oh my God, we have to have him on. We have to have him on. And it was like, yeah, we did the interview. I was like, what? No
Yeah.
one invited me, but apparently you guys really get into something. And Ash is like, I can't wait for you to hear what we talked about. I'm like, oh my God, now I'm a bit nervous.
I don't even remember what I said now. Now I'm nervous. But it's nice. We got a chance to connect now since we missed our chance then. So
we do, and I love our little podcast crossover. Like, what does a charmed podcast have to do with a bisexual podcast crossing over? But actually, a lot, apparently.
a lot, right? What were some of your like favorite topics that you covered on Bisexual Brunch? I know there's so many, and you talk about bisexuality all the time. But
there's so many. I think so. The three of us that do the podcast, we're all in some way connected to the media. And so we have really good discussions about like, okay, what is the problem with getting bisexuality talked about in the media? And because we all have experience in like pitching it and like, oh, this news editor said this to me, and obviously we're not going to be bad mouthing anyone, but at the same time, we're talking about like, why does this representation not work and that kind of thing. So that's interesting. I think also, being able to talk about being in relationships and bisexual. We're all older, so I feel like there's this whole thing of like, oh, you're only bisexual while you're young, for some reason, and then it's like, oh, well, as soon as you've got a partner, well, you're not really bisexual anymore. That whole trope. But the three of us were all in long-term relationships. We're all now, sadly, over 30, so we're getting older.
I'm 34. I'm 34 at the end of this month, so I feel you.
Oh, well, happy birthday! Happy early birthday!
Oh, thank you. Yes.
But yeah, turning 30 was hard. But anyway, so just kind of like all having that perspective of like, we're not out there single and young anymore, but actually I think maybe that's what people need, because it was definitely what I needed when I was coming out. It was kind of like, people would be like, oh, but eventually people come out as gay or straight, don't they, though? Like, you don't see any bisexual 30-year-olds. And I remember that was something one of my ex-boyfriend's best friends said to me. And I was just like, oh my God. And I kind of was like, oh yeah, I guess. Because I was so unconfident in myself. Well, now I'm the out 30-year-old bisexual. So there you go.
Right. There you go. Believe it.
Believe it.
But like, I remember when I came out, which was like, 2008, 2009 when I came out, at least to myself. It was hard to even see the bisexual flag. People didn't even know what it was then. And now it's, becoming more noticed and stuff. So much has changed in just in that decade,
Yeah, but it must have been. I can't imagine how hard it must have been coming out back then as bisexual. It's so weird, because I think, and this is something we talk about on the podcast as well, is this sense of community. Like, it's a really hard one. Like, biphobia, the most common place you find it is within the LGBT. Like, gay guys can be just as biphobic as straight people. And that's hard, because I think, when you're kind of like in a marginalized group, you're like, okay, well, I'll just be around other marginalized people and we'll support each other. And it's like, no, they didn't even like you. That's always hard. And then I think, especially being a bisexual man, so we're like the least likely of the LGBT to actually be out. So it's like, okay, well, already there's not going to be many people out. Of those, it's like we don't find each other in the same way like gay people tend to kind of flock to each other and find each other. It's just harder to find other bisexuals. And then you might find some, and you might just be completely different. Because I think with bisexuality, there's just so many different versions of it. You can be a virgin and be bisexual. You could have only ever dated men. You could only ever dated women. You could have a revolving door or have an open relationship, whatever it is. Who knows? So there's so many different experiences that sometimes you can meet other bisexual people. It's actually even hard to connect. It's like, well, we don't really have much in common, actually. So that whole community thing is really important to me. And I actually have suggested, like, maybe bisexuals should stop thinking about going to Pride as a place to connect. Maybe we should just have a stall at Comic-Con. Because apparently, I'm trying to find things like that where it's like, oh, there's a big percentage of bisexuals that love like Comic-Con. So why don't we just do something at Comic-Con?
And there's been so much resurgence of bisexuality in comics, which, it's like full circle.
I don't know if you do stuff to like date the time of recording, but like obviously this week Superman's son came out as bisexual. And that is great, because I'm a huge, like, I really don't like tokenism. Like, I really don't like it. And it's a lot of the problem that I have with the new Charmed, where it's like, but Charmed was so clever, and it was about metaphors. You didn't have to be so blatant as like we're fighting this. It's like no, like it's metaphors. Like come on. Um, so I'm really against like the whole tokenism in like comics and whatever. But I do feel actually like it's statistically it's very likely there are bisexual superheroes. So actually having them come out in 2021 feels about right. And actually it would have helped, it would have helped to have more points of reference of like, oh, this is one version of what bisexuality looks like in the media, in this comic book, in this TV show, whatever it is. Yeah, so it's a weird one because I usually am like, oh, it's just tokenistic. They're not really committed to it. But with this one, I'm like, no, I think that feels right.
Right. I haven't read the comics to know the character, if it's appropriate or not, but I'm all for it. It's very exciting. But it was crazy the amount of backlash that I've been seeing about it too. It's like,
well,
oh my god.
But stuff like that keeps me in business.
That's true. That's true. So yeah, something to talk about, something to go against. It's great. So speaking of, you have a fiance now, right?
I do, a fiance.
And your beautiful baby,
and
Maisie.
Beautiful baby Maisie, who's 1 year old, who is sleeping in the other room.
I see the pictures. I'm like, that's like the cutest baby I've ever seen, and I'm like obsessed. So
thank you. I've got to post. I'm so bad at posting on Instagram right now, but we just had her first birthday, and I need to post all the pictures from that. So there's some more cute pictures coming. She is so just cute, so advanced as well. Like really weird. She was like walking at 8 months old, which is kind of unheard of. And everyone's like, oh my god, she's so advanced, isn't that brilliant? I'm like, no, because we were meant to have more time of just you put her somewhere and she stays there. And now she's like literally like in the kitchen, like throwing the bin over, and it's like, oh my god. And we think she's going through the terrible twos already. She's only one,
wow.
But she's getting to the point we're in.
Advanced.
We were in a clothing store the other day, and she was like pulling some of the clothes off. So I was like, oh, you can't do that. And she screamed, tensed up, and like fell backwards. And she's just like screaming and rolling on the floor, and all the other parents were looking at me, and I was like, oh my god, like. You think of this moment, and now it's finally here. We're going to actually have to do this. Like, you're going to start having temper tantrums. But she's brilliant. She's so cute. It's so nice to see someone that, like, is made from your DNA. So it's like, oh my god, you have, like, similar traits to me, and that's interesting. And
I mean, I see your eyes in her all the time.
Really?
So, yes.
So, yeah. I'm really... I always wanted kids, so I'm really happy.
And your girlfriend, she had a son before?
Yeah, so I'm stepdad to Jamie, who is 12. So it's a weird one because we've got a boy that's going into his teens. There's going to be this aggressive teenager smashing the house up, and then we've got him running after this little baby that's smashing the house up. Oh my god, we've really picked our moments to have them at these ages. But yeah, having a stepson is awesome. It's obviously it's different, right? And it's a different path into fatherhood because you kind of like you're dating this woman and then you're also trying to bond with this child. But honestly, it's worked out really well. Like I think, and like we get on, we bond, we do our little things. We used to wake up early and watch Legends of Tomorrow when that was nice. Good. So we would wake up and watch an episode of Legends of Tomorrow together and then get ready for school and work and stuff like that. So we always have to find our little thing that's just ours. But yeah, it's really cool.
Okay, awesome. And then how did you discover Charmed? Like, what was your Charmed journey like?
My Charmed journey. So I was 8 years old, and I had always kind of liked magic. So like in the UK, we had like a show called The Worst Witch. There was just kind of like a lot of shows. There was like the Queen's Nose, if you've ever watched that. It's like this magic 50p and stuff like that. So there's like I was always into magic, and I always loved being at my nan and granddad's house. Me and my nan were really close. And she basically this one day she was like, "Oh, there's a new show starting tonight, and it's got Shannon Doherty in it, and it's about witches. So we'll should we go and should we watch that tonight?" I don't think she realized like the age of it because it was obvious it's quite grown up for an 8-year-old. But anyway, literally, so we watched the first episode. So many people obviously discovered Charmed like when it had been on, and then had to like watch the episodes. But no, from episode 1, me and my nan watched it together, and I was literally hooked from the get-go. I was like, and I literally never missed an episode.
Yeah, I saw every episode on original air date as well, and it was super exciting. And I don't know if it came like to UK like a year after here, or if it was like.
So it was an odd one. So basically, you guys got it first, and then it aired on Living TV in the UK, which was like only the rich kids had that because their parents paid extra.
I remember the commercials. I downloaded the commercials back in the day for UK for Living TV.
And then, but basically, we watched on terrestrial TV, so there were like 5, or at the time there were just 5 channels, and it was on Channel 5. So we kind of watched it. We were like the last to watch it. So you had America went first, then the UK posh people that had Living TV watched it, and then we got it a few months later. So I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was like the 1st of April that it aired here on Channel 5, but obviously the year after it aired in the
it's got fan bases all over the world, which is really quite astonishing and awesome.
It's such a testament. As much as I'm not like a fan really too much of social media, I do really think like if social media had been around back in the day, like I think it would have been bigger, because I feel like people for some reason, I don't know what it is, but people just had this whole thing about like, oh, like it's not a serious thing, it's not a serious show, whatever it is. But you speak to people, they're the most passionate people. They like, we're talking about this like 23 years later, and it's like people loved it. And I think especially it was kind of, we'll probably get into this like as we kind of go over the book. But I see a lot of parallels between Charmed and being bisexual, if that makes sense. Like, and obviously, like I didn't know I was bisexual as a youngster. There are so many parallels. There are parallels of like, being like ashamed to say I watch the show because like you're a boy, you should be out doing this. Why are you watching this show about these witches? It's like, oh, I should keep this secret because people won't like it. But then even like in the show, obviously, it's like we're witches, we can't talk about it. How are we going to tell our boyfriends that we're witches? It's like, yeah, that's so like a coming out, and you didn't need to be so blatant as like, it's we're coming out as gay. It was like, no, because now like there are so many people that can resonate with just the metaphor of like, oh well, I have to come out, I have to tell someone this identity of me that they didn't know about. And it's like, I get it. I'm intelligent enough to get that and to be able to interpret that into my own life.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I guess we can start with this book.
Let's do it.
It's called Between Worlds. And this is the first cover that has a season 5 promo picture.
It does. I mean, your book is a lot neater than mine. I mean, I know that this is a podcast we've got. So I had to reorder mine off Amazon, and it literally came like battered. But
oh my god,
you like look at the state of it. What's terrible is at my
looks like a dog ate it.
It literally looks like a dog ate it. At my grandparents' house, I have most of the books, and I do think I have that one. But just with like the pandemic and babies and stuff, I haven't been able to go back and get it, so I had to reorder it. Which was fine. I have like in the same way as the show, they have like the trunk. It's got all the books in it. Like I have all the books in like a trunk there from my childhood.
Mine are up there on that shelf.
I've seen them. I'm literally loving looking at the background. It's such a shame you live in a different country, because I would say be like, where I'm coming just to have a look at your props.
I know, and like I live here and I have nobody to show. It's like I want to show off all my collection and nobody's here to show around.
No one cares.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
But yeah, it has the season 5 promo picture. We have Paige with her red hair, and it's really nice. I remember when the season 5 promos came out, I was like, oh my gosh, crazy.
I know, naughty Rose McGowan doing her hair without asking anyone.
Yeah, right. Yes. But people loved it, and it was a good look for her. So
it was.
I won't be mad. And then it has the background with all these like little spider webs on there and a spider, and then there's like 2 jack-o'-lanterns. One looks normal, one looks like it's kind of having a stroke, but that's okay.
That's the one that's bitten off on my book.
Oh yeah, it's this one. Yeah, It's just like got one eye's upside down. It smiles like kind of. It's like it's really wonky, but that's fine.
And then we have this. Be reading around Halloween time though.
Yes, this is a Halloween book, if you haven't guessed. And in the middle has like this big, like blood orange moon. Looks a little bit like a potato, maybe.
Yeah,
I can't tell. Like a very round potato. But yeah, it's a kind of this orangey moon. And it has the tagline, "Powerful emotions wield terrifying force." And then the back says, "Breath of air, soul of fire, grant this night my heart's desire. Womb of earth, tears of sea, bring my lover back to me." The Halliwell sisters are no strangers to Halloween hijinks, but this year the Wiccan celebration of Samhain is met with a rash of destruction throughout the city. Upon further investigation, the charmed ones learn that the demolished buildings they've heard about are actually melting. These sites are in fact the location of dimensional portals, and they're under attack. Piper, Phoebe, and Paige will need to secure these barriers in order to prevent all havoc from being released. But the demon working against them is no ordinary monster. It's a wraith, the product of a grief-stricken young witch seeking to resurrect her lost love. And hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. I love how they have like a Charmed episode reference in there.
I love it. I just realized how, like, that thing on the front, "Powerful emotions will terrifying force." It's like, that's a massive spoiler, actually. Now reading the cover again, I'm like, that's such a spoiler.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. So this book is written by Bobby J.G. Weiss and Jacqueline Wilson. And I actually went to the Amazon page for this book, and Jacqueline Wilson commented on it, and she was like a co-writer, and she was like 16 at the time. So she was just learning.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Do you reach out to a lot of people that, like, have been in the books or, like, worked on the show?
Not too many yet. I'm hoping to get Paul Ruditis later on to talk about the books or comics, and Pat Shand has agreed to come on when the time comes. So,
Oh, amazing.
yeah. So
I saw some interviews the other day. There's this girl that started interviewing, like, people that were on the show. So she interviewed, like, a couple of the actors, but also interviewed, like, the guy that did the soundtrack, which is I love a good soundtrack.
I know who you're talking about. That's Charmed Forever P3 or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how she contacted them. I'm sure she has to pay them. Yeah, she's interesting, and that's Jay Gruska that she interviewed, and that was a fascinating one because she makes YouTube videos too. So I watched some of those, and yeah, she does a good job.
We're getting distracted again.
I know. But yeah, this was published September 1st, 2003, and reprinted November 3rd, 2003. So, yeah, it's finally in like near the end of season 5 at this point. But this book also actually takes place in season 4, despite the season 5 picture. It takes place the Halloween of season 4, so between like A Night to Remember and Lost and Bound.
Well, I did kind of like look it up, and it was like, there are things that don't make sense about the timeline here. It's a bit you're gonna have to squint your eyes at it.
This is the most chapters. It's like 29 chapters, but they're really short.
They were really short, which was really nice
Yeah.
for someone reading it between like changing nappies and stuff.
It made a real momentum. Oh, another chapter done. Another chapter done. So I didn't mind it so much. It was kind of cool. So chapter 1 starts off in a very tidy, super clean apartment. And we see C.K. Pierce, this woman, and she's like in disheveled. She's got really messy hair. It looks like she's been crying. Hasn't showered in some days. So she's like, something's wrong with her. And apparently she went into a magic shop last week, and she came home to find this book in her bag with a snake on the cover. She's like, I don't remember buying this book. And, she tried to like throw it away, and it kept coming back. And she's like, I'm getting driven crazy. And then she's been hearing these like voices in her head begging her to use her power to do something she doesn't want to do. So she's like, oh, that book must be crazy, making me crazy. And the voice tells her to do a spell that will bring her and her dead fiance. Yeah, her fiance like died a year ago, and his name is Jace. And the voice is like, do the spell, you can be together again. And so she does the spell from the book, and nothing seems to happen. So she runs out of the apartment in frustration. And then the next morning, you see like the shadows that lingered in the darkness of the room. It's like daytime now, but they're still like shadows. And then they swirl around the snake book, and it took like this human shape, and then it howled through the front door. Ah!
I love that. Like, you really remember it as well. Like, I've read it, but I'm like, oh my god, like that, you just reminded me of stuff. Like, chapter 2. So Piper is cooking for Halloween. That's kind of when she reads the newspaper and sees that there's been this string of random buildings that are just melting away. And oh, I love this because it's so like you can see it as an episode. So like Phoebe's coming in, like sipping a coffee, and they're like, she's like not. Well, she's like stealing Piper's coffee because she doesn't want her own.
Yeah, right.
She doesn't want to make her own coffee because she's too tired. Then Phoebe touches the newspaper and apologizes that she didn't get a vision. Leo orbs in, but Leo's basically been told by the elders that they need to start looking into these melting buildings. And that's when Paige comes in, and because it's Halloween, like Paige, and obviously this was be her first Halloween as a witch. So Paige is like loving like dressing up as a witch, like a cliche hat with the pokey thing, the cape stuff. So she's loving it. She's loving life.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, there's some stuff in there. Like Piper is making like Halloween treats because P3 is gonna have a Halloween party. So she's like, I'm gonna make some skeleton fingers. She talks about Day of the Dead, which I always liked because I'm a big fan of Day of the Dead. And she like talks about how it's like honoring the dead and making them feel welcome. So we're setting the mood for Halloween, which is nice.
Yeah, I loved like the setup for this book. Even like the fact that we like don't start with the girls. Like in the beginning, it was very much like it very much felt like the first episode where it's like, oh, you've got this
Right.
side thing going on that we lead with, and then we kind of like come to our goals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought it was a great start to the book.
Yes. So Paige calls him into the room to watch the living room to watch the news. She's like, "Yeah, look at this," and the news reports of the statue in front of the First State Bank being melted. So another sign of vandalism. People think it's vandalism, and Leo says that the elders don't think the vandalizations are random. He says that each point of attack represents a key to a different portal between the land of the living and the dead. So these are like specific targets, even though they appear like they're random, they're really not. So the souls of the dead, because this is around Halloween time. I think this is the day before Halloween or the day or Halloween day. I forget which one, because it goes like 3 days in this book. But the souls of the dead should be returning over the next few days anyway. So Leo guesses that the attacks are happening on the living side of the portals in order to block the spirits from returning to the land of the dead. So the spirits will come, and then they won't be able to get back. CK, which is the chick from the beginning, she's looking homeless and disheveled as ever, and she's just walking the streets of San Francisco. And she's like exhausted. She's kind of almost in a daze, and she's like blindly following this voice in her head. And it's, because I guess the voice can like harm her. It's like inflicting pain on her body somehow. So as long as she does what it says, it will leave her alone, which is ominous.
So chapter 4. So Piper basically goes to P3 and like she sees like there's police people around it, and obviously, as any bar owner would do, is like, oh god, please don't let that be my place of work. And so yeah, she goes up, and basically a side of P3 has been melted away, so that's goodbye to your Halloween party. And interesting that even P3 is in some way magical.
Yeah.
We never touched on that again in the series. So basically Piper like runs into the detective, which is Detective Anderson, who's kind of like dealing with it, and she actually feels like sympathy for him. She's like, well, you're never going to solve this, are you? Because this is definitely magical.
Right.
You poor little
this is
thing.
out of your jurisdiction here.
So he's like quite rude to her, I think. He's like, well, I know it's your business, but you're not coming in. And obviously she wants to kind of get in, see if there are any clues that she can kind of look at. And as she's kind of like going back to her car, she realizes like, oh, I don't need all of the Halloween treats I've been baking. So she goes back and gives him the Halloween treats. And what else happens? I actually have to look at the notes now. And I think that's basically it. Like then he warms up a little bit and gives her his card, and then the press is like after like Piper for comments, and she's like, no, I think he's doing a good job. Leave him alone. But then it kind of cuts to Phoebe and Paige going through the Book of Shadows. And what I love, like, so like Phoebe's like baiting Grams to kind of like flip the pages, like, come on. And it's like this whole like thing of like, well, she's not going to just help you out all the time. Like, You have to really need it. But
You have to make
eventually,
the right discoveries before she'll help you, or something
that's
like
right.
that.
So then the pages start flipping, which is great. And then meanwhile, the shadow, quiet and stealthy, searches for the one it's been summoned to find.
So, chapter 5, Piper fights through the reporters because its P3 has been melted.
Oh, I gave
Everyone
a
wants to.
spoiler away. I got carried away like that. I thought that happened in the previous chapter. Fine.
No, it starts because she does find the police and barricades there too. So it does happen in the previous chapter. But so she cuts to that first to get to the cops, and now she's coming back out to get to her car. So she has to fight the people again.
Yeah.
So yeah, and as she drives off, she locks eyes with CK, the haunted woman that sends a shiver down her spine. She's like, "Oh, that woman! I don't know. She rubs me the wrong way." And then Phoebe and Paige read from the Book of Shadows where it flipped to, and it was a very long.
It's a very long entry. So not accurate because the actual book is literally like 4 lines usually with a big picture because it's a TV
Right.
show.
Yes. I'm assuming this entry would probably be like a 2-pager spread.
Yeah.
and just very small writing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the page they find is for a ward, and it says a ward is a grouping of portals or doorways through the energy barrier which maintains the balance between the realms of the living and the dead. While individual portals occur throughout the world, wards occur only in places of significant psychic activity. For this reason, they are particularly important. Though the function of portals is universal to act as doorways, they operate differently in each of the 2 realms. For the dead, the portals are permeable. The dead may pass through them, particularly if invited or summoned, but except for certain times of the year. For the living, portals are not permeable. They are closed. In this way, the dead are permitted to visit the living when the time is right, but no living person may enter the realm of the dead before their appointed time. Portals may be damaged by psychic energy. The type of damage depends on the realm of which the attack occurs. Damage from the realm of the dead will result in a portal being open to anyone, living or dead. Damage a portal in the mortal plane, and nobody gets through at all. Any dead who happen to be visiting can't get back home. Particular concern should be paid to damaged ward portals. If too many portals in a ward become damaged, the entire ward may fail. This in turn may cause the permanent disruption of the energy barrier, which maintains the living and dead status quo. Destroying the ward portals from the dead side will leave the energy barrier open to the living and the dead. Destroying them on the living side will seal the barrier closed. Okay. So that was the whole thing of the Book of Shadows. But now people have context of what is happening in this book. So
For sure, that was worthwhile what you did.
one thing, Cole believes the demon is not responsible, but something that crossover wants to stay. So he thinks it's not a demon.
Yeah,
it's something else. Okay.
So chapter 6. So CK is basically we're kind of back with her now. She's fearing that she's going crazy. And she's kind of replaying in her mind like why it was so weird that like locking eyes with Piper had done something to her and it kind of jolted her back into herself. But basically, she is like, obviously, she's still hanging around P3, and basically, she's like in the alley. She sees that the door is left open, like by one of the cops, and so she kind of sneaks in. So she, out of everyone, she gets to go into P3.
Yes, so she's hiding out there. Then chapter 7, the sisters together are cleaning the P3 mess. Like they're finally allowed inside, and they're like cleaning up. Leo and Cole arrive with lumber because they're going to try to repair the wall that was melted. And then Phoebe goes to return a broom that she's been sweeping with to the closet in the back. And then she is flooded with a vision of the cries of the spirits going crazy because they can't return to their home. They begin destroying the living world, and then they unleash their fury on the living and all that stuff. And then CK bolts out of the closet. So she kind of touched CK in the craziness. And then Cole catches her and holds her firmly but gently. So he grabs CK. He's like, "Oh, you're not going anywhere. I got you." Piper sees the girl and she's like, "I know you. You're that crazy woman." And and then CK's demeanor softens and she's like, "You know me? Do you know my name?" And Piper's like, "No, I don't. I'm sorry." And then CK just goes mad. She's like, "Ah!" And she's like, "Neither do I." And she faints.
I feel like you really did that chapter justice. That was some good acting there. You really brought the whole thing to life.
Oh, thank you.
I'm not going to do that for chapter 8.
Okay.
Basically, yeah, she's passed out. We go back to the manor now. She's sleeping upstairs in one of the bedrooms, and that's when Crafty Piper. I think that they have like a discussion about have you burnt her clothes or not. But like Piper's actually just cleaning them, so she's in the laundry room. And that's where she kind of finds her ID. So they kind of like know who her name is, where she lives, and that kind of thing. And then Piper pulls out the newspaper and points out CK in the first few damage sites. So the site pieces get written out. It's like, hey, she was at P3, and actually, this is where I've seen her from. She's always in the news, like near one of these sites when the buildings melt. And the whole chapter is kind of undertoned by they're having a conversation, but Paige is really into the whole trick or treat thing. So she keeps taking off to the door to go and like answer the trick or treaters in her witch's costume.
I love that.
I love it. So basically, this is kind of where we kind of start getting the two worlds colliding now. So CK kind of like starts to open up just a little bit. I think she's nervous about Phoebe. I think Phoebe's a bit snappy. She's on edge after the premonition. So she's a bit like, why does this woman keep snapping at me? This is difficult, you know? But anyway, so she starts kind of like explaining that like her fiance died nearly a year ago. And all she kind of really remembers is just this endless walking that she's been doing. But then basically when Paige comes back from dealing with the trick-or-treaters, she kind of clocks the witch's costume, and that's where she remembers that she attempted to do the spell to bring Jace, her fiance, back.
Yeah. She's like, oh my gosh, I remember. Chapter 9, Phoebe became annoyed. She's like, you did a spell? Are you kidding me? She's like, think of all the dangers. CK says this is kind of a sad, because CK gives her history. She's like, I was raised by my grandparents after my parents died.
Yeah.
And they told her, her grandparents told her, because they knew she was magical, she's like, you need to contain your powers, because they were mad that their mom had powers. Their mom was a witch, and they're mad that she had powers, and she thinks that their powers is what killed her son and them. She's like, well, you need to hide yours because we hated your mom for being a witch. I'm like, oh, horrible.
For sure. Parallels were there again. Parallels were there of like coming out and being special and being different and being told, no, it's a bad thing. You better hide it or else.
Exactly. Like, what a crazy metaphor.
I feel like this whole thing, like, it's such a vibe of like season 4 that I kind of forgot. It's like, oh yeah, it's like, it was when like, Cole was there, and he's like, I feel like the best Cole was where he was good, but he still had his powers. So it was but it's like, oh yeah, that whole vibe of like Phoebe and Cole there, and Piper and Leo and Paige is just kind of there, like figuring it all out. I'm like, oh yeah, I think that might have been like one of my favorite eras of the show.
Right. CK agrees to lead the group to her apartment to find the source of the spell that she did, so that they can try to counteract it. So like, okay, you did the spell, we're gonna go back to your apartment and find it. So now chapter 10.
Yes, they arrive at the apartment. She apologizes because the lift is broken, so they have to climb the stairs. Basically, they get in there, and it's obviously a mess because it like looks like a spell has happened and something's been summoned. And she's like really apologetic, like, "Oh my god, I made a mess." It's like you're about to destroy the world.
She's so OCD.
Yeah,
that's great. That's why it's important to know how tight it was in the beginning, because she likes it very well kept, and
she's like me before I had a baby.
Yeah.
So basically, Cole finds the serpent book, and he recognizes it as the De Vermis Mysterious. If that's how you pronounce it.
Sure.
So it's basically he recognizes it as a seriously evil book, and like kind of like it pieces it together for him. Like this evil book is like haunting this young girl.
Yeah, the De Vermis Mysteries in English means mysteries of the worms.
I love that. I love this as well. It's always like, I mean, if you're a child fan, you probably every time you come across like a magic book, it's like, ooh, what does this one do?
Yeah, but the fact that they call it like the super seriously evil, I was getting very like Necronomicon vibes.
Yeah, in my head, it looked like similar to the Tuatha book.
Oh yeah. Back at the manor, Cole guesses that the book has taken CK as a conduit. So Leo orbs in, and the elders clammed up at the mention of the book. Oh yeah, so he comes back after meeting with the elders, and they're like, yeah, they didn't tell me anything. They just freaked out. I'm like, okay, typical elders, not having any help whatsoever. Thanks. And the evil book twists the powers of anyone who performs a spell from it and takes them over. So I guess just looking at the book doesn't do anything necessarily, but if you perform something, it's bad.
Well, they get really worried about who's touched it, don't they? Like, it was you touched this.
Right. So Cole says they need to look at the spell CK used, and everyone's like, hell no, I'm not touching that. It's like, who's going to volunteer? He's like, I guess I'll do it since, fine, I was a demon, whatever. So Cole volunteers and he opens it while the others just kind of like sneak behind him and they look over the shoulder like, "Ooh, what does it say?" They don't read it out loud, but they read it in their heads and they analyze the spell and decide to go to the bookstore that CK mentioned finding it or like going visiting.
So chapter 12, the sisters and CK arrive at the Seeking Eye. So Samuel Gibson, who is obviously the owner, arrives in kind of Renaissance flair attire. But he kind of like clocks quite early on that they come about the evil book. So it's like he's in a store and then he kind of takes them into the back and there's like I think it's Piper like is looking, she's like, this is the real magic books now.
Yeah.
So he goes to the shop and kind of explains that the book followed him after he came into contact with it and realized that it's kind of now moved on to CK. So he kind of clocked CK and he recognizes her and recognized that the book went after she came in. So he kind of clocked like, oh, thank God, that book that won't leave me alone's gone. So he takes the girls back and shows them another book with two intertwined serpents. This book is one about the history and the creation of the evil book. So quite like that this evil book is so evil, it has to have another magic book to explain about the other book.
You're right. This book kind of reminded me, I thought of the Never-Ending Story because there's the two interlocking snakes.
Yeah.
So, little books here and there.
Sure.
Chapter 13. So the book that they just found about the evil book talks about Meleager and Malvolio de Vermis, and they were twin brothers, and the serpent was their family crest. Okay, so we're making some connections. And there was a sibling rivalry. Malvolio turned evil because he was jealous that Meleager was like the firstborn and had all the birthright, and like he was probably stronger than him. He's like, how rude. And so he becomes so jealous and evil that Meleager had to trap him in the book. If Malvolio can destroy the world as we know it, then he will be freed from the book. So he has to. So they think, so that's why these portals are being destroyed, because if the world is gone, then he'll like be free to do whatever. And then CK just like leaves the shop, not telling anybody, just runs out. They're like, hey!
So chapter 14, so CK runs and runs, and she's trying to fight the voice in her head, but like losing. And kind of back at the bookshop, Mr. Gibson kind of like works out that they're the charmed ones, and then he's really honored that he's in the presence of the most famous witches of the land. And then basically Leo and the sisters kind of like start trying to make a plan for how they're going to track down CK.
I thought it was kind of cool how like somebody who's practically mortal like knew about the charmed ones, because he studied so much magical history. He's like, oh yeah, I know about you.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to know more about why did the book attach to him in the first place.
Like he was like studying it. He was a student of a college professor, and the professor was like selling his collection, and so he went to the auction. And
so are we supposed to believe? So obviously, like I was like, oh, like is he actually magical? And the book originally wanted to like manipulate him to use his magic, or was it just like the book knew eventually he would come into contact with CK where it was really trying to get to?
Well, no, I don't think the book or the person in the book would have known that far who it would go to, but I think he is drawn to people who have some kind of ability or like innate. And it could have just been his
I was trapped in the book. I'm like, I'll go with this weirdo that owns a magic shop because eventually someone magical will come in.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Just kind of like taking advantage of situations, I guess,
Evil.
Yes. Chapter 15. Paige and Piper find an old teddy bear. Because they're in CK's apartment still, and they find an old teddy bear and a locket in CK's apartment, and then they go back to the manor with them to like, we need this stuff for a spell we want to try. So Piper and Paige perform the spell, and then they scry for CK, and then they called Phoebe as she was driving Piper's car. I had to mention that Piper's car because I don't know if they say it was Piper's car, but it's the only way it would make sense. A lot of these books say Phoebe has a car and she does not. Not at this point.
Got you.
So yeah, they called Phoebe and she's driving, and then they made a plan to meet at the scried location. So they found a portal of where CK is going to be, and so Phoebe drives there. And as she drives there, she hears these sirens, like police sirens, and she's like, ugh.
Piper, Paige, and Leah are in front of a burning warehouse. And the latest portal is destroyed, so they're not getting very good at keeping these portals safe at all. And that's where they kind of see CK in the rubble, and Leo saves her and orbs her back to the manor to safety. Sorry, and then Phoebe arrives and picks Piper and Paige up.
Chapter 17, real short. With Cole, they plan to see if they can find the remaining portals, and then a scream is heard from upstairs of the manor. Chapter 17.
Yeah, so they're all running up, and like Cole's having none of it. It's kind of like, no, don't go. You don't know what's going to be up there. They're kind of like they don't care. It's like their job. And like, does Cole forget who they are for a minute? And like, well, this is kind of their thing to run towards danger, right? Where have you been? But basically, Piper kind of gets up there first, and there's the dark humanoid shadow. It is there, and they're kind of mesmerized by like, what the hell is that? And then it comes at Piper, and she's trying to freeze it or blow it up.
Freeze it.
One of the two.
Something.
And obviously that's not working, and it kind of like goes straight through her, and she kind of collapses. And the chapter ends with CK kind of yelling like, "She's dead! She's dead! No!"
Yes, very dramatic. She's like, "Oh my gosh, I've killed her!" Chapter 19. Leo carries unconscious Piper downstairs. He's like, "She is not dead." So he puts her on the couch and he heals her. And then CK's like, "Oh my gosh, you all have powers too, don't you?" And they discuss what passed through Piper was a ghost. Like, is this a ghost? Like, what happened? And then Piper says, it felt more like, because now she's healed. She's like, it felt more like an energy of like grief and pain. And then they tell CK all they know. Like, they admit that they're witches and what they found out about her in the book. And then Piper has an idea. And she's like, "You guys, come with me to the Book of Shadows. I know something we can try."
It was kind of like, I got to this stage in the book, that chapter, I was like, oh my god, yeah, she doesn't know. I forgot that she didn't know that they were magical too. And there was like kind of like a really nice line in it. Again, and I'm not just banging this drum for fun, but it was literally like, she's like, "Oh my god, other people like me," which is so a bisexual thing. I'm like, oh.
I know.
It's like, it's no wonder I was so into this as like a child.
Yeah, and I don't think we mentioned it in the chapter because we do learn that CK did have like, what was it, psychokinesis or something? She could like move things with her mind, but stuff she couldn't see, much like Max did. So yeah, that's why her grandparents are like, "Don't use magic."
Yeah, do it. So they obviously go upstairs to the book. Again, I feel like this is where Cole's like, "Are you really sure you want to do this? Like, show her the book."
Right.
But anyway, I don't know what Cole's problem is this whole book. Piper lectures CK about how she tried to use magic to substitute her own healing process, and that she's basically the key to finding the problem. So there's this whole kind of like, is it my fault? It's like, it's not your fault, but it's kind of all linked to you. So take that as you want. And that's what, I mean, this whole chapter is very much like Piper just kind of like pieces it all together out of just, a little shadow going through her. She's like, oh, I totally get what's going on.
Yeah.
They kind of work out that the dark shadow is CK's grief. And CK and Piper, basically, they hold their hands over the book. I'm believing this is not Grams this time, but this is actually the book deciding like what pages it's going to do.
It was kind of like, I think it was like taking like Piper's magic and then CK's kind of like experience with it and like her memory or something like that. Maybe it's both the powers combined.
It's a total side note, not to get too distracted, but in your head, is the Book of Shadows all pre-written and it was all there already? So they were flipping past like Necron in season 1, or is it that the book pages appear as they need to? What did you always think?
Well, if you listen to the Book of Shadows bonus episode, we have a nice conversation about this. Well, we talk about that.
I didn't remember.
But we talked about like, what do we think happened? And we kind of decided that we think that the ancestors have some kind of magical link to these other things. So the ghosts of their ancestors have the power to kind of add things as they go.
They're like, I should have written a page on that when I was alive, but here I can do it after I'm dead. Here's what I know.
Right. Yeah, here's what I learned from the other side kind of thing. And yeah, that's the only thing that really makes sense to me. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense. Like, how do people know how to vanquish this demon before they've actually been vanquished? How do, and why, if you peruse this book so many times, why haven't we seen this page before now, So that would explain a lot of inconsistencies if I choose to believe that headcanon.
Very interesting. Basically, they're holding their hands over the book, and it flips to the spell to restore a riven heart, which, if you've been paying attention to this podcast, is the same spell she used in the evil book. So they're kind of like, why the hell is this even here? But this one, basically, it shows CK's face in the book. So in the artwork, it's actually CK's face, which is well trippy. Because it's like,
yeah, crazy to me.
yeah, hey,
Like, what the hell?
you only just met me. How have you got a picture of me in your book upstairs? It's just crazy.
Yeah.
And it also shows the two brothers as well. So, but the idea is like it's the same spell, but because the Book of Shadows is a good book, it's going to bring the best version of the spell, I guess. But anyway, Phoebe summarizes that CK's grief and the brother bond have to be restored in order to stop the evil. They know Malvolio. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, you got it.
Malvolio is in the book, and Leo thinks that Mileage's whereabouts are known to the elders, but they're hiding the information.
Chapter 21, Leo remembers an old legend of an old mage that is to be protected until the time is right. That's until the time of right is very key. And he thinks, you said Malig, I say Maliger, you said Millager? Maybe it's Millager is better. Okay. And he thinks Millager is that mage. So Leo says, this is funny to me. Leo says he's got a special orbing technique that will orb him to a person he's focusing on instead of a place, which I feel like that's how orbing always worked, but sure.
Yeah.
I
did get annoyed in the books when they took a bit of liberties with the powers. Like when they start throwing energy balls, it's like, what? Did you not watch the show? So even this kind of irritated me a little bit, where it's like, well, I never really thought about it like that, but now you're trying to make it like it's a whole new subsection of your powers. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about that a little bit more detail when we get to the end, but yeah.
Cool.
But yeah, so Leo wants to orb to Milliger, but because they are twins, or the evil twin, he could actually head to the evil one. He could orb to the evil one by mistake. So Cole's like, you know what? I'm gonna come with you. I'm like, if you're a human now, maybe you'll know information, but you're not really gonna do much. But sure.
Exactly. So Leo and Cole orb out, not shimmer out, which suggests Cole does not have his powers.
Yeah.
So Phoebe kind of basically finds 6 more portals on the map. I don't know how many were there in total in the end. I can't even remember.
They never really told you.
Yeah. So anyway, we don't know how close we are to it all collapsing because we don't know. There might be 100 portals.
Yeah.
But CK volunteers to let the evil brother take her over again, so that the sisters can basically follow her and stop her from destroying the next portal and track down the evil.
So be brave, CK. Okay, you got it. Chapter 23. Cole and Leo have some nice. I love Cole and Leo together because it's very bro. It's very like, yeah, we're bonding here. We're cool.
Yeah.
And then they orb to wherever they believe Milliger is, and then they come face to face with him, and then they learn that he was there for 500 years. They cross through this little barrier in there, and then they learn that he is actually aware of everything that's happening. And he has I'm going to read this part of the book because he has the sadness. I thought it was really nice moment. Page 160. My brother and I were close in many ways. We forgave each other many things as we grew from boys into men, but having been born first was the one thing Malvolio can never forgive. In time, it destroyed his love for me. It has been my life's work to resist letting it destroy my love for him. Wow. So he's very, because he's always loved his brother. He's always felt a connection to his brother, and it really hurt him that Malvolio has succumbed to all this darkness, and that he had to do what he had to do in order to keep people safe.
Yeah.
So Milliger started the De Vermis, the evil book, for good in actuality, and to help restore his brother. So the spells in there were to help restore his brother's love, but it was twisted into evil when his brother was kind of taking hold of it. So Milliger says he will help out when the right conditions are met. Until then, he has to stay stuck in this little room because it's some kind of spell that protects him. He can't leave at all. And then Milliger tells Cole and Leo that when they entered this room, they became bound to the laws of it as well, and he didn't realize that they didn't know that. So Leo and Cole can't orb out, they can't shimmer out, they're trapped in there until Milliger is allowed to intervene, and that's when they all can be released.
I feel bad for them. It's like you're
great.
trapped now too. You got too involved in this.
Yeah, and we can't even tell anybody our problem.
I know.
We tell the sisters. Great.
Anyway, chapter 24. So it's All Souls Day now. So Piper is kind of like figuring it out, pacing around, wondering like where Leo and Cole are. The sisters and CK crack jokes about Linda Blair. And then CK becomes possessed. So this was kind of the plan, that they could follow her. It kind of flips back to Cole and Leo being kind of frustrated and stuck. So Milliger like lets them peer into the Hallowell Manor.
Yeah, because there's this tapestry wall, and you can like touch it and like see visions.
Yeah, don't touch the tapestry.
Yeah, Cole's like, "Ooh, I'll touch it." He's like, "No!" It just cracked me up the way he like rebutted at him. I'm like, "Oh, that's funny."
It is funny. They witness CK's position. Milliger recognizes his brother, and then possessed CK is basically like demanding car keys because she's got to go find the next portal. So Phoebe gives her some keys. She's like, "Sure, possessed girl, take my car." Actually, I think she gives her Piper's car, I think.
Yeah, she gives her Piper's car because Phoebe doesn't have a car. She's like, "Here's the SUV."
4. She doesn't have a car.
Yeah, right. So, and these books forget that all the time. It's like, this is season 4, no car. Even in the season 1 book, she was driving a car. I'm like, no.
They should have really had like fans like you, like pre-read the book and be like, okay, here's all the things.
That's true. That would have been good. But yeah, so possessed CK, Malvolio / DK, I demand a vehicle. And she's like, "Do you mind if we come along?" And he's like, "You won't stop me." But he does. He lets them come anyway. It's so strange. Like, if I'm going to be this evil possessed thing, I'm just going to take the car and run. But sure, he waits for them all to get into the car.
Yeah.
They'll become passengers. CK's driving the car. And
there's no way I'd have gotten that car.
I know. I'm like, this is hilarious.
Unless I was Paige, so I was like, I just all about if it like gets too hairy.
Yeah. Although technically, too, at this point in season 4, Paige shouldn't know how to orb place to place yet.
Yeah. Well, there we go.
So, but anyway, she does in this book. So, but the CK drives to a graveyard, and all the sisters are in the car with her. And CK approaches the graveyard gate, spoke some Latin spell, and then the metal gate melts with her hand.
So CK basically finds an angel grave and starts to melt it. So Piper freezes her, thinking that will work. But because Malvolio is inside her, and he's like outside of time, so basically she continues to kind of melt the angel grave. And yet again, another portal is destroyed. As I say, they're not very good at protecting these portals.
No.
And the dead are all around. So the spirits of the dead were visiting the living. Malvolio rose out from CK's body, and Leo and Cole are kind of like a Milliger are kind of watching through the tapestry.
It's like, the time isn't right yet. Can we leave yet? He's like, no, not yet. I'm like, come on!
Yeah. To be fair, they've only been trapped for like 2 chapters.
That's true.
I don't even think it's been a day yet, has it?
No, it's just like hours, but still. Piper began to... Oh, yeah, that's chapter 27. So Piper, she's like, I know what I have to do. So she begins to taunt Malvolio, and she's like, starts to like make him angry. She likes to like, you were never better than your brother. You're not powerful. And he's like, oh, how dare you? And so he gets angry. He attacks Piper. And then when he attacks, Phoebe and Paige run over to CK because Piper's trying to be like a distraction. And then Malvolio calls the spirits that are all around, and he tells them that they're trapped now in the living side. You know, nice visiting your loved ones, but you will learn to resent them now because you can't go back. And Piper is to blame, so go get her. And so the spirits all swarm Piper and attack her. It's like, how dare you? and Phoebe and Paige tell CK that, you know, you can save Piper. You know, you have the power. All you have to do is accept your grief. And so CK willed herself, and she's like, okay. And she closes her eyes, and then She summons the shadow back to her, and she takes it back into herself, and she accepts her grief, which is really a beautiful moment.
It's such a
So
beautiful moment. And it leads into another because chapter 28, it's time. The Rue Milliger was in, kind of begins to disintegrate. So Leo and Cole can orb out. It's time. And basically, finally, you have the two twins kind of stood face to face. And that goes straight into a battle. So Malvolio attacks Milliger, and Milliger basically like kind of takes the attacks, embraces them. He doesn't make any effort to fight back. You're gonna read the thing.
I do. I have the thing because it's so beautiful. All right, so it has like he's like, I will not fight you, Malvolio. And he takes another step towards him. I will not fight myself. We are the same, you and I. He's like, that's not true. I'm nothing like you. And then he's like, oh, yes, you are. And I am like you. Together we were formed. Together we will die. That is the only way for us. Neither can exist without the other. Haven't you figured that out yet? And then he opens his arms like to hug him. And then this is when Malvolio starts to kind of fight through his emotions. Like he loves his brother, but he's like, no. And then he like kind of gets in this like fit of crying, and he's like, I've hated you all my life. I won't stop now. And he's like, you haven't hated me, Malvolio. You never hated me. You hated yourself. And then, it's like, oh my gosh. So it's all about self-reflection and like really coming to the point of your own emotions and what they mean, what the roots are.
Don't you just love the metaphors?
Yeah.
So basically, they cry and accept peace. He becomes one with his brother, and the brothers disappear in light. And CK kind of comes to terms with the fact that Jace is gone, and in doing so, it allows his ghost to be seen.
So yeah, so they get to like really have their moment now and talk to each other. Oh,
I don't know if I like that though. I get it, but I'm like, but you just accepted he was gone, and it's like, oh
I
no,
know.
magically he's back because you accepted
Right.
he was gone. Okay, fine. You know.
Yeah, it is a little defeating the purpose. I feel like that's something that would have been nice to do, but maybe like the following year, like not this instant,
Yeah.
So yeah.
Anyway, chapter 29, the final chapter. You take it away.
So the reconciliation has healed the energy barrier. So because at first I've been wondering like, so how do we get back these people back? But I guess because everything is back to normal, everything is fine, it's healed. Cool.
Yeah.
So the next morning, Piper makes coffee cake, and this is so nice to me too. She makes coffee cake to honor Prue because it was Prue's favorite, and this was something that was Graham's recipe, but Prue always really loved this coffee cake. And then Piper and Phoebe like to talk, and they wonder if Prue's spirit ever comes back, and they think about how much she loved them and how much they love her. Oh, I cry. Paige comes in and she is set to mentor CK on magic later. She's like, okay, she's kind of a witch trying to learn things. She is to really adapt to her powers. Cool. And then Paige has some coffee cake, and she starts to feel like she had become closer to be a part of Prue as well. And then the sisters do dishes together, and it's the end.
Beautiful.
So, did you have any final thoughts?
Just that I really like. So this is the second Charmed book that I've actually read myself. So my nan would read these to me.
Oh wow!
So they're really like. There's only two that I've ever read that weren't that I read myself. So reading this one, it was actually quite nice, especially for someone that's like in a busy life and stuff. Like to like you know where it's like the description, it's like, oh, you know, going up to the attic and stuff. It's like just actually transported you back into that world. I'm like, oh, the good old days where life was simple. You could just say a few magic words and your problems were solved. I really enjoyed the book. I think it was a good story. As I say, I'm seeing all the metaphors and the parallels. So I loved that. I kind of feel like it ended just about right. As I say, I don't like the fact that she gets to see his ghost at the end because I feel like that defeats the purpose, but never mind. And yeah, and it really, like I said before, it really took me back to that vibe of that season 4, like Cole is like around with Phoebe and Leo is there. It's just like, oh yeah, that really was Charmed. That was such a good vibe.
Yeah.
Like there are so many other periods of Charmed where it's like, you know, was different and that was good for other reasons, but I really loved that kind of early sort of season 4 vibe.
Yeah, season 4 was a good season. So
yeah. What are your final thoughts?
Overall, I found this to be like a very engaging and poignant story. Like from beginning to end, I was invested. Because you know there was very strong emotional themes and allegories and significance, so I was really moved by that. Kind because there are so many simple, like they're very simple things, but they're effective. About one's self-worth and power and how you deal with love and loss. How emotions can shift so much that you begin to hate yourself or lose yourself, and they morph into something like that's so great and different that you forget where they came from. So that was really nice. I thought Paige running around in the witch costume was super cute to me. And I love that the book throws shade at the elders. Because the elders are never my favorite people, and they really kind of like tell you how much they hate the elders in this book.
Yeah.
Piper does it, and both Leo does it too. So I'm like, all right.
I just say the whole hating the elders thing, and I completely forgot about that until I reread it, and I'm like, oh my god, yeah, like that makes that like literally, it was a weird one because I always felt like that maybe they should have never shown them on the show because obviously as it kind of like went on, it was like you kind of saw them more. But I kind of like those early days where so it wasn't until season 5 we actually saw one for the first time,
Right.
and I kind of liked it more. Like there are these people, and I kind of like the mystery of them a bit more.
So the next thing is put that in my canonical hat.
Canonical.
So this is where we talked about like what is not canon, what is canon. Could this book fit into the series if things are tweaked? Those type of things.
I don't think so because I feel like CK number one is like, well, if Paige is going to mentor her, like she doesn't do a good job because we never hear of her again. Also, Paige is like new to it herself. What is Paige going to teach her?
I know. CK probably had her powers longer than she did. Really.
Blindly lead the blind.
CK should mentor you.
Exactly. So the canon. So, well, obviously not because if CK doesn't come back into it at any point, it's that would be my biggest one. It's like you went for this whole thing and you don't keep in touch. That's cold. I guess also even like the stuff like the whole P3 thing with like I get like obviously it's like well it just wasn't mentioned that they were fixing the wall and stuff like that, but I just kind of feel like I don't know. I feel like I would have known if like P3 would have been destroyed for a bit.
Right. But there are also a lot of episodes that are like one-off. Things happen in one episode and never talked about again in the series. So it's very typical for episodes to be self-contained in certain ways. But I don't know. For me, like I could see this being canon just for like as like a one-off story, like just being put somewhere as because I do think it could fit really nicely. I mean, it was interesting. It's different than what we've seen before in the show in a lot of ways. One person, she's like a villain and an innocent, so that's kind of fun. I like the Cole and Leo bonding, male bonding. And I did think that the sisters like honored Prue in a really perfect way because it didn't feel preachy or forced. It was just like a sweet and simple reflection of what they're thinking about, which holds a lot of meaning, I think. So I think there are a lot of elements in this book I would have liked to see in the show, and they just have to tweak a few things, like the orbing technique. It makes it seem like this is all out there and it's new, but Leo orbs to a person all the time. Like he hears his charges, they call for him. That's orbing to a person. Or like when Wyatt, he can sense his Leo and he orbs right to his dad. So it's like that's nothing new.
Yeah, actually. Now it's like coming back. It's like when Leo is stuck in that tank, like Wyatt obviously doesn't know where he's going. He's going to a person.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Cole's powers and stuff. I don't think that makes sense at this point in the story, right? Because Cole, you can't have both things. You can't have Cole without his powers and Paige knowing how to orb properly, because those kind of things literally overlap. But like one episode in the Three Faces of Phoebe, so that's where she learns to orb properly, but then he gets his source powers. That's like the most geeky sentence I've ever said.
Well, there you go. Welcome to Words of the Witches. I did something I didn't notice that was funny is because there's this whole chapter where they talk about Linda Blair and they talk about The Exorcist and they mention like the head spinning and the vomiting. I'm like, that's a throwback to the very first episode when Phoebe mentions, she's like, I vomited split, my head spun around and I vomited split pea soup. What do you think happened?
Yeah,
I like that. So now we're doing rhyme time.
Should we try a spell?
Why not? Let's try a spell.
In the wind, I sing this rhyme. Bring death before me, before my time.
You've really got to lay off the rhyming, Prue.
Wonderful. Witty, but wordy.
I did the rhyme. I will do the time. Good night.
So I'll do the first one. This is the spell to restore a riven heart, and this is the same spell that is in the Vermis Mysteris or whatever. It's the same one in there, and the same one that's in the Book of Shadows. So this is the one that CK cast. Place a scarf of indigo-colored silk embroidered with gold moons and silver stars over a medium-sized wooden cutting board. Votive candles in black, white, purple, blue, and orange spread around the altar. Bright green malachite to represent earth, a tail feather shed by a bird in flight to represent air, water to represent water, and a cone of sandalwood incense to represent fire. Or why can't you just light a candle? I don't know. Fire is fire. Scatter tangy and sharp spears of rosemary as the herb for remembrance. Then place a photo of a lost one in the center and chant the following. Breath of air, soul of fire, grant this night my heart's desire. What once was lost, restore to me. Womb of earth, tears of sea. So the spell itself, like the words, I really enjoy. I think that's really close to what was on the back. And it's a really nice spell, a really good flow, really beautiful words. And I like this representation of things, but it's a lot.
It is. And you did something even the sisters wouldn't do in this book, which is read that spell aloud.
Oh, yes, I know.
So the other one is the scrying spell for CK peers, which requires a map, of course, and a necklace dear to the target. So it goes, beings who see, beings who say, aid me in this task I pray, where CK wonders, let me see, as I will, so mote it be.
Mm-hmm.
Which is cool. The so mote it be is obviously that comes up in a couple of episodes. That we love a good scry on this show. It's an alright one. It's not their best.
Yeah. It doesn't do anything for me. Like, doesn't excite me.
As spells go, it's a C-.
Next, I'm going to do best Baddie rankings.
Seems almost anticlimactic after all this time, doesn't it?
It was the only way to get their powers.
And now I want yours.
Darkest forces, let it be. Hear my plea, bring life to me.
You can't run! Frozen! In fear!
Best Baddie! Alright, so this is the 20th book, which means we reached the end of this section for Best Baddie. So it is time to put it to a vote. I'm going to reveal my top 10, and then I will tell you how you can vote for your top baddies. So Malvolio from this book doesn't quite make my top 10. He actually landed at number 11, so he's so close, but didn't make it. Just because he was ultimately just a misguided character, and, loved his brother, so too sweet to be a bad baddie. My number 10 is Jeremy Burns from the very first book, The Power of Three, and the very first episode. And that's just because he was a creepy, jerky, iconic villain. Number 9 this is going to be a shock, it's the source of all evil. Just because I'd base him strictly on the Charmed Again book, not his character in general. And while he was pretty menacing in Charmed Again, and maybe just because I'm so used to him, the source isn't that interesting to me. If you think about Charmed and Dangerous, and you think of him as arc of the whole series, he's a much bigger baddie, but Charmed Again itself didn't quite make it for me. So, yeah. Number 8, I actually like Shax more. I think just because he's a man of few words, he looks very menacing. The body, the face, the hair, the wind powers. He seems more powerful to me than the Source a lot of times, even though he's the Source's assassin. But I like Shax more. Number 7 is Ray Marino, the human. He's immortal, and he was from Mist and Stone, and he was the administrator of the home for the boys. And he's just a despicable human being. And there are people like that in real life, which makes him very terrifying to me. So I did put him in my top 10 as number 7. Number 6 is Gabrielle from our last set of books, the 5th book, in Voodoo Moon. And Gabrielle was the voodoo chick that was very misleading and very quick to react in her emotions and just very scary. Number 5 is Athulok from Beware What You Wish, book 10. Another Shax-like character, but the way he was describing things, he was very kind of poetic, very prolific. Number 4 is Scar from Mist and Stone. He was the Dark Lighter that had powers of black orbing, blue orbing, voice manipulation, pyrokinesis, apportation, technopathy, and invisibility. And he was just he had a history. He was a human, a gladiator who became a Dark Lighter, and he was just a fascinating character. Probably one of the strongest Dark Lighters we've ever seen. Number 3 is Timothy Mcbride. He was the one from Mirror Image, the one that was trapped in the mirror. He was the one that was killing all these girls. He was a very scary villain in terms of how he was killing the girls, and a very good actor to make Paige trust him. Number 2 is Vandalus from Garden of Evil. He was very insidious because he was that philanthropist. He had the whole world fooled, and he was very powerful. He had a whole set of powers: hypnosis, thermal blast, super strength. You can create force fields, and he was trying to get True Love's kiss, which is a really cool twist on that fairy tale. So I thought he was very fun, very different. And very menacing, and just the way he trapped Paige in that garden was oof. And then my number 1 from my favorite book thus far, book 15, Dark Vengeance, is Kevin, Karen, and Kate, the Dark Warriors of the Dorchak clan. I thought they were so good. I thought their history was so cool. I liked that they're like these ancient warriors that were reborn. It's just a very epic kind of tale, and they did their job really well. They had really cool goals, and it was a really great book overall. So my little blonde trio. Now there are some I did not mention. I'm going to be posting those on my Instagram stories for you to vote, and I'm also going to be putting a poll on Twitter for you to vote. If you don't have either of those or don't feel like voting on those, you can still email wordsofwitchespod@gmail.com with your top 10, but nobody emailed them last time, so I don't anticipate getting a lot of those. So be on the lookout on Twitter and Instagram for those votes, and then the baddie that gets the most votes at the end, number 1 spot, will move on to compete in the next set of books. Last time I did the 3, and it was too many. So we ended up with too many baddies too quickly, because a lot of these books have 2 books, especially since we're doing 11 books for the next set. Now we're going to get into 10, 10, 10 to 10, 10, 10. Here's 10 things. So we talk about, because this is like a Halloween book, our 5 favorite transformations or like costumes that was featured in the show.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So, well, the first one I have is probably my least favorite of all, but it's not going to be in my top 5 list. I'm just to mention it though. It's Undercover Demon Paige from Baby's First Demon, when she goes to the demon marketplace and she's like in this blonde wig and this crazy blue dress, and I hate it. It's awful, but I also love it because it reminds me of a dessert.
A dessert? What dessert?
This is very specific. I go to Disney World quite a bit. So at Animal Kingdom in Walt Disney World, there's Pandora, the world of Avatar, and there's a restaurant called Satuli Canteen. And in Satuli Canteen, there's this blueberry cheesecake that's supposed to be like this alien cheesecake, and it looks like, I think of it and I think of Paige in that dress.
I love that. Do you live close to Disneyland?
Well, Disneyland is in California, and then Disney World is in Florida, so there's 2.
Oh, right.
I don't really live close to there, but I go there like a lot.
Wow, how come?
Because we're in the vacation club, so I get like an annual pass. So I go about 2 or 3 weeks out of the year, every year. So if you've been to Animal Kingdom and you know Charmed, you'll put them together. But I'll make a little meme and put it on the Instagram so you can see it too, because it's going to be funny. My real number 5 is the superheroes, because I love superheroes. I thought they did a really good job with those. They're really fun to see. Yeah, and I don't know, they're very colorful and I enjoyed them.
But they're your least favorite?
My least favorite of my top 5. So
okay.
This is my top 5 of all the shows. So there's ones that come after that. So number 5 on my tops.
Okay, fine. I am gonna say Genie Phoebe as my 5th one. Like, I just didn't get it. It was too close as well to being the goddesses, where it was like, oh, you've just got a lot. It's probably the same wig. I just didn't. I just wasn't feeling it. I just wasn't feeling that one.
She wore a blonde wig a lot. Like, I'm trying to think. She had, the goddess. She had the Wrong Desire to Right, where she's like infiltrated the Demonatrix, and she's in that blonde wig. She had Godiva. She wore that a lot.
She loved it.
Yeah. My number 4 is Piper turning into the Wendigo.
Ooh, okay.
The Wendigo is probably one of the scariest things that I remember from watching Charmed in season 1, being like 11 years old. I thought it was so scary and it looked so real. All the prosthetics and things and the hair. And then Piper did a really good job, or Holly did a really good job of like showing that transformation and her personality and how sick she looked, and it was a really good moment. So Wendigo has to be down there for sure.
For sure. I always thought they should have brought the Wendigo back in like a later season, like it because they gagged it a bit in the show. It's like, oh, when Piper turned into the werewolf, blah blah blah. And like it would have been so good if like it had happened again or something like that. That would have been a really good episode.
Yeah, I would have liked that.
I know
we did get the once in a blue moon, but that one, that one bothers me.
Yeah, that's not even on this list. But what was I gonna say? On your whole scariest moments of Charm, so what can we like sidetrack into that for a sec? Was that honestly your scariest moment, the Wendigo?
Season 1 had a lot of scary moments. I think because I was so young, and I think Kali was another one, the mirror demon, that scared me a lot with her eyes and the fire and everything. Yeah.
So there's only one time I was ever actually scared of Charmed, and it was season 2. So I used to watch it with my nan a lot. So it was season 2, and it was Elias, the ghost.
Yeah.
And he appeared, and I remember it, I was like, and I literally jumped, because I was sat on the floor, and I jumped backwards onto the sofa to where my nan was, and like, held her, she was like, should we turn it off? I was like, no, we can't turn it off. But I was like freaked out. I couldn't go into rooms that were dark for a while after that. I don't know what it was, because I watched it back now and I'm like, what was I so scared about? But it was just creepy. He really creeped me out.
Do you think it was his look, or just like the shock value of how he appeared? Or
I think it was a shock, but I think it was probably that is what a ghost looks like. You know what I mean? Like that is what.
Yeah.
If you're in an old creaky house that's dark and you open your door and he's there, like I would kill myself too. Like it's not worth it. Like, I don't even try and survive. Like, oh my god, like that would just be terrifying.
Yeah. I believe he comes back, or is at least mentioned in one of the future books coming up.
Oh right, okay.
So we'll see.
My number 4 is Banshee Phoebe.
Okay.
I actually feel like that was quite like it was late season 3. It was kind of dark the whole episode. I kind of like loved all the kind of like shimmying with the arms kind of thing. It was all like I don't know. It just kind of it stayed with me. I quite liked it, and I feel like it's one that not a lot of people talk about, but Banshee was one of my favorites.
Yeah, she looks cool, and it wasn't a blonde wig; it was a white wig, so that's even better.
Yeah, there we go.
and those eyes and those teeth. I mean, it was a good look.
Yeah.
My number 3 isn't necessarily a transformation, but it was definitely a costume.
Okay.
This was Prue as Ms. Hellfire.
Yes.
It was so good. It's iconic. It was so good. Shannon had a ton of fun doing that episode. It's definitely one of her favorites. She's quoted as saying before. She just that little hair wrap thing, that long ponytail, the cheetah print jacket. It was such a good look, so sexy. Just seeing how confident she was and having fun playing that role, it just fills me up with so much joy.
Yeah, that was fun. I feel like it would have been so much fun if they could have figured out a way to like do that a bit more with her. Like, like she would have been good as like an undercover person.
Yeah, and
that would have been her job.
Shannon wanted to take the show into a more serious, into a darker route, and that's part of where there's some.
It's
friction,
interesting.
tension.
There was if only we could go into the alternate world to see what would have happened if she'd have had her way.
Yeah.
Anyways, so my turn. So the next one I would say is the Valkyries. It's not just the costumes, it was just the vibe of the episode. It was quite nice to have them kind of like having to pretend to be them and kind of go undercover again. I thought the outfits were great. Obviously, it's the first one where Alyssa's got her short hair. It's kind of like, is this going to work? But it really does. I love that episode, but I also, I think the costumes for that one were really nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were fun. I felt very tropical, which, I love tropical things.
For sure. And then they made the little action figures on them as well.
Yeah, they're
And
very,
not just the girls, not just the girls. Like Leah's looking good.
yeah, gladiator. Yeah,
A little
outfit.
gladiator outfit.
My number 2 is Vampire Paige.
Ooh, okay.
Kind of along the lines of, the mood of Ms. Hellfire Prue. Uh, but yeah, she, a very nice red slinky thing. Her pale skin really worked well for that. She was very like sultry and moody, and I liked the eeriness that she was giving off. So
Love it. Love that one.
and vampires are statistically bisexual too. So there you go.
Well, exactly. So there we go. Bring in the bi vibes.
Yes.
So my number 2 would be the Mermaid. Phoebe
Okay.
Mermaid. I'm not just going off vibes, but that was such a good episode. It was a good 2-parter. I loved the whole like underwater thing. Like growing up, I kind of had a thing for mermaids as well as witches, so this just combined everything. It was great. I thought the costume was good. Obviously, the whole. I think that they might have come out and said something against it in recent years, like how revealing it had to be and stuff like that. I can't really remember, but for us back then, like it was a revealing costume. It was very interesting how they did it. But I loved it. My favorite bit of that though was not when she was in the water. It was where in the second part of it, where they're like brainstorming and they're like consulting the book in the living
She's
room.
in the
She's kind
tub.
of got the
Oh.
towel over.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I quite love that. I love that she's just there, like, why am I here? Let me
She's-
go.
just drinking water.
Yeah. She's like, I said there's salt in this water. I love that.
Yeah. Very fun. My number 1 is another threefer. It's the All Hallows Eve costumes. They're iconic too.
For real.
I love them. I don't know if it's just because of the vibe of the episode, but Phoebe as Elvira is really perfect. I love Prue's little fairy thing with the glitter, and Piper as Glinda just cracks me up, and how she freezes with the wand. Like,
Yeah.
It's perfect because it has a very Halloweeny feel, and it was very cute, and I just had a good time with that. So I have a picture that Wayne drew a picture of them in their costumes.
Yeah.
I have a print of that. So.
Oh, that's cute. Love that one. Loved that episode. So my first choice is the gods.
Oh, goddesses. Okay.
The goddesses. I mean, not only was it all powerful, but they had so much fun, like with their subjects and forming their little tribes. Obviously, I loved it. I love the actual transformation of like Chris is like, you're about to find out, and they're like, what are you talking about? And it's like
through the ceiling and the swirling, and then your
I think in the dailies that got leaked, like after years, there was like a different version of them, and they didn't look as good. It was like they looked like they got like a potato bag or something.
I do remember that briefly. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So the ones that they actually went with, I mean, they look incredible. It's so iconic. The whole the picture, obviously, where they're in kind of like the sunroom, like at the end. That's very much like, yeah, powerful, very good.
Mm-hmm. Everyone loves a good toga.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, that's our 10 costumes.
It's interesting that we didn't have any that we agreed on. Like that's how many transformations there were. We're like top 5.
There's so many.
We didn't have the same ones.
Right. And I was kind of hoping we wouldn't, because I tried to pick ones that weren't as mainstream, but still, I'm glad, because diversity,
There we go.
And there's still so many that we didn't mention. There is so many. So
honorable mentions. I do think my worst one, my real worst one, I really hated Phoebe as like the teenager. But I just didn't.
Oh, and high school reunion.
Yeah, I wasn't feeling that one.
Okay, yeah, that was another wig for you. She
Another
has a lot
wig.
of wigs.
My God. No wonder she rebelled with her
hair. All right, so our final thing before we close up is the tip for future white lighters.
I was out being a force of good in the universe.
What is the moral of today's book that we could have learned?
Ooh, the moral of the book. Moral of the book, I would say, is that no matter how alone you feel, there are others like you who are looking to do good in the world, and you have to find your tribe.
Oh,
because as soon as she found the sisters, her tribe, they were able to sort all the bad stuff out.
Yeah, they got to work together and really support each other, and wise. That's beautiful. My tip for the day is, as hard as it is, choose to persevere in the face of grief. Commemorate love rather than pain. Find yourself, become the hero, and carry on, I guess.
I love it.
So,
That's really nice.
yeah. Thank you. All right. Well, that's the end. We did it. Oh,
we did it.
So,
as if we finally did the podcast.
It was so great. I loved having you. You're awesome to talk to. It's great. Our kin. We are the kinship.
We
forever
are.
And ever.
I definitely want back when you move on to the comic books, if that's
okay,
still the plan.
For sure.
Because
yeah,
comic book, I loved the comic books. Obviously, with the books, I think that whole canon thing is always in your head and stuff like that. But because the comics are set kind of after the series, and I totally see them as canon, I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. So, but in the meantime, where can the people find you? Where can they follow you?
So, do listen if you're interested in bisexuals to listen to the Bisexual Brunch podcast. And if not, I am at Louis Oakes on basically Twitter and Instagram. But I've got to be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of Twitter. So I'm usually just retweeting stuff I find interesting there. But if you want to see pictures of me, eventually back in my topless self, because I need to go to the gym again. But Instagram is probably the one.
Okay, yeah.
Or just Google bisexuality. There's usually me with my top off talking about something.
Oh, I love that. We need to do like a bisexual photo shoot together. That would be awesome.
I would love that. Well, the next time you're here, or the next time I'm over there, we'll have to meet and do a crossover bisexual photo shoot. That'd be so good. You can bring me a gift. What are you going to bring me? You need to bring. You're making merch for this podcast, aren't you?
Yes, that's a part of the plan. So shirts or something. Well, you can find this podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube under Words of the Witches. And I did make a Twitter for this now. It's just Words of Witches there. And then email me at wordsofwitchespod@gmail.com if you feel like it. Or you can find my personal one at KGZ87 on Instagram. And so we'll see you in 2 weeks. Your destiny still awaits.